6:38. It's been called the most radical reform of policing for 50 years. In fewer than 3 months, most of us will get a say on who should be our first police and crime commissioner.
Well, it's a new role which will aim to make our local police forces more accountable. The elections will take place across England and Wales, but not in London next November.
The biggest change in policing for a generation, but most people don't even know it's happening. For the first time outside London, people all over England and Wales will be able to directly elect someone to represent their views on crime and scrutinise the police.
Policing is a really important public service, but you can't choose your police force. So you need a way of holding the police to account and making sure that they deliver on their promises and can effectively cut crime and treat people fairly. In the old system, we had a committee of appointed councillors. Many people didn't know this body existed, it was pretty invisible, and it wasn't very good at holding the police to account.
The new system will see one person get the job in each police force area until May 2016. They'll have the power to hire and fire chief constables, and they'll earn between £65,000 and £100,000 a year, depending on the force they're overseeing. The big challenge for the government with this idea is persuading enough of us to turn out to vote. Ministers here say this is all about making the police more accountable, and that will happen once we get to know who our regional commissioner is. But if the turnout is as dismal as the weather in November, the critics will say the whole idea is a damp squib. Chris Mason, BBC News at Westminster.
Well, the elections are, just 12 weeks away. So with us to discuss this, the author and former police officer Mike Pannett, and John Collins, who's Deputy Director of a think tank called the Independent Police Foundation. Good morning to you both. Well, I suppose the question posed by Chris Mason there is, what if they held an election and nobody came?
Well, I think it's a worrying prospect. It certainly is for the policy exchange, who have sort of driven the idea of police crime commissioners. I think it's not a great time of year to be running an election in November. I think there's about 5 or 6% less people turn out, but I think what they need to have is a mandate. And if they're going to have such a low turnout in such a what will be an absolutely vital role, then I would be quite worried at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, well, John, a vital role, Mike says. Is it a vital role? Is this an important position that people need to get a little bit more aware of?
I think it is a very significant role, certainly. I mean, the Home Secretary's described it as the most significant reform of policing of our lifetime, and I think she's right that it will make a big change over the medium and long term. So I think it's very important that we've sort of 3 months to go now till the election, that people understand what the role is, what it is they're going to be voting for, and they come out and vote on the 15th of November.
Well, can you describe that briefly for people?
Certainly. I mean, what these individuals will do, they'll be elected in November, and they'll be responsible for oversight of the police. So they'll replace police authorities, they'll hold the police to account, and they'll make sure the police are responsive to public demands. What they won't do is run day-to-day policing. That will remain the job of the Chief Constable.
These posts open to pretty much everybody, but they have become, the campaign's become rather politicised, haven't they, Mike?
Well, Bill, that's exactly what I'm worried about. I think it's become, to me, a bit like a party political election. You've got the Conservatives on one side and Labour on the other side. That's the front runners at the moment, and I think people are sort of quite turned off about it all, because I think they've seen all the problems we've had with our politicians in the past, and I think what we've got to remember is the police are there for the public. And we police, if you like. The police by consent. And as soon as you start politicising this role, which I believe it is, then there's going to be a lot of influence come from government into our police service, which I think is wrong. I mean, Robert Peel set up the police service 100 and odd years ago for the public, and I want to see a totally independent police away from politics.
Well, this is an issue then, isn't it, John? Because we've got criticisms of the fact that it's too politicised, but also that it should be for the public. And how else do you make it for the public other than having an election where the public can vote? And how do you have an election without political parties being involved?
I think it's inevitable that if you set up a reform which involves an election, political parties will run from that. Is, after all, what politicians do. I think it is worth remembering there's now close to 50 independent candidates running as well.
But without the same resources as politically supported candidates.
They don't have the same resources, though I don't think necessarily that the political parties are throwing money at this election either, but certainly they don't have the volunteers, the infrastructure that political parties have. So I think those people who are running as independents do need to think about how they can get themselves elected, how they can raise their profile, how they can make sure that people locally are aware that they're running.
Should it be an election at all?
Well, to me, you know, I'm really concerned. I am concerned because you've looked at the way it's all come about through policy exchange, and only recently the head of our policy exchange was talking about his apocalypse horsemen riding through these great changes in what will be huge changes to the way police operate. What we've got to remember is there's going to be 41 police crime commissioners and 42 if you count Boris Johnson in London. And it is, you know, this is what I'm really concerned about, is keeping politics out of our police service.
Right. What's the best way then to persuade people to go out on a wet day in November and vote for this role they're not very familiar with? Do you think, what would you say to people?
I think it's up to candidates locally to convince people what the value of this role will be and what changes they will make to local policing. The last poll that I saw suggested that about 2/3 of people thought that this new role won't make much difference to how the police operate locally. And as long as the figure's as high as that, you can't see people turning out to vote. So I think it's up to candidates and everyone involved into policing to be clear about what changes will come about as a result of this election.
I think I would really, I made my points quite clear with this. I thought anybody who was affiliated to any political party should have stepped away from the party that they were affiliated to become totally independent, because let's face it, police crime commissioners should be there to represent the whole of the counties that they're going to serve, and not just one section, if you like. And I think that's very clear. They've got the oath they're going to be taking, and I can't see, if you are going to be influenced by one way or the other, that's the best way forward for our public.
All right, Mike, thanks very much indeed. And John Collins from the Police Foundation, thank you very much indeed as well.